Hi, I'm Jeff McLane of the Philadelphia Inquirer, Eagles beat reporter, joined here with Jesse Newell, Kansas City Star, Chiefs beat reporter, and we're here to talk about obviously Super Bowl 59, a big matchup that puts these two teams against each other 2 years after they faced off, and the Chiefs won a close one, 38-35. We're here in New Orleans a few days before the game, and we're going to kind of go over some of the three key points from this game. I'll start us off. Jesse, number one, I think the Chiefs offense, obviously Andy Reid has been doing this a long time, but it seems like he's doing it a little differently this year. And, he always has a lot of misdirection and kind of eye candy that he throws at teams with motion. But, what is it about this unit this year that they're getting it done despite not really having great receivers on the outside?
Yeah, well, if you haven't followed the Chiefs, lately, the last couple of years, you just think about Mahomes from, 19 and 20, where he's just chucking it down the field. Tyreek Hill's down there somewhere, forget it. He's going to catch it. And this offense has become something totally different the last couple of years. It's become very efficient, brutally efficient, but they really don't do explosive plays. Kareem Hunt in the backfield, I know that's the running game, but he's a guy that'll get you 6 when there's 4, get you 5 when there's 3. But the passing game really has followed the same way. They drafted Xavier Worthy as a speedster out of Texas in the first round, hoping he could be a deep threat, but they've started to use him on the short routes. And so this has really been kind of a scheme-dependent thing. And you do give credit to Patrick Mahomes for changing his style of play. It's kind of like Tom Brady. He kind of chameleons himself, he becomes what he needs to be. But this is a team that's built on 12 play, 14 play, 16 play drives. And it also, as you might expect from what the Chiefs have done in past seasons, it gets better over time. It gets better in the postseason. So, for example, last week's game, the AFC Championship game, it was Patrick Mahomes' best game of the year, one of the best passing performances they've had all season. And so this team is peaking at the right time. And you mentioned some of the misdirections and motions. Nobody's better than the NFL getting an extra week than Andy Reid and trying to scheme up some things that other defenses just haven't seen or can't prepare for. So I think you're onto something there. The only thing, obviously, for the Chiefs side of this is that you look up and down the Eagles defense and not many weaknesses there. I mean, we were kind of trying to look at some of the advanced numbers, me and Sam McDowell at the Star, of where can you get at the Eagles passing game? And nothing, deep they're good, short they're good, middle they're good. And so this will be a big challenge for the Chiefs, but obviously Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid usually step up in these moments.
Yeah, so one of the stats that's been thrown out there a lot is Patrick Mahomes versus Eagles defensive coordinator Vic Fangio over his career, and he's 8-0. He's won all those games. Now, you could point to Vic Fangio and some of the teams that he was either the head coach or defensive coordinator for. They didn't have offenses as strong as this one, so I don't think that's entirely fair. But I think this is going to be stylistically an interesting matchup between this Chiefs offense. Like you said, it will take the check down. Mahomes will check to the run if the boxes are light. That's kind of what Fangio wants to compel an offense to do. So it'll be interesting to see what breaks here. He's okay playing a little bit of a soft coverage. He likes to have 2 high safeties. And, they're going to have to rally the ball. They're going to have to tackle the catch. I'm a little worried about what happens in the red zone. I'm a little worried if Vic plays a little too much man coverage. I think that Kelsey versus man versus C.J. Gardner-Johnson versus Reed Blankenship. I don't know if those guys can cover him because he's so nifty in how he's able to kind of create space and get away from guys. All that being said, as you mentioned, Mahomes just seems to get it done. And that's the concern, I think, for this Eagles defense is if it's close and he's got the ball in his hand at the end of the game and a chance to win it, it's hard to bet against Mahomes. Next point here, Steve Spagnuolo, we know him pretty well here in Philadelphia. He was the linebackers coach for a while under those Andy Reid teams. Protéged under mentor Jim Johnson, longtime defensive coordinator. Jim Johnson likes to bring a lot of pressure packages, loves to blitz, and that's pretty much what Spags will do a lot of. And the Eagles have, they'll spent the last 2 years trying to kind of erase the memory of how they handled the blitz in that meeting in the Super Bowl. Specifically, there was one play in that fourth quarter that Jason Kelsey says it's the one play from his career that he regrets the most because he didn't really set the protection right. And Jalen Hurts, there was an unblocked defender. He was hot, and they had to throw the ball away, and the Eagles had a punt late in that game. What is it about Spags' blitzes? What does he do to really rattle quarterbacks and make them, have to move off their first or second read and have to kind of throw in the spots where really guys aren't open?
Yeah, their Rolodex is deep. And I know talking to these guys in training camp that they try to install everything in training camp, and guys' eyes they're going, oh my gosh, there's so much information. Their heads are kind of spinning, but that's so that you have that base information in there. And then you can go pick chapter 9. This will be good against the Eagles, or chapter 11. This will be good against the Bills. And they vary it week to week. One of the kind of underrated things about this Chiefs defense is the continuity. Not only it's interesting with the coaching staff for the Chiefs, which they've won 2 straight Super Bowls, but really last year they didn't lose any coaches off their coaching staff. I mean, you look at like the Lions, they lose everybody. 49ers seem like they lose guys every single year. The Chiefs don't. And so they have that coaching staff continuity. You teach guys year to year the same thing, and all of a sudden you get to training camp and you're starting at grade level 6 or 7 instead of starting back at grade level 1 as you would with a new teacher. The other part of this is the continuity of their players. Like if you look back, this was fascinating. In the offseason, the Chiefs brought in nobody from outside the building the previous year other than their draft picks on defense until they traded for Cam Thomas from the Cardinals. And he's actually no longer with the team anymore. And that was way up in August or September. I think it was late August when that happened. So they basically brought back, Chris Jones they brought back, Drew Tranquil they brought back, a lot of their big names, a lot of the guys on their defensive line like Mike Dana. So these guys know the system. And now the way that Spags plays this thing, he asks his players to do all sorts of different things. I talked to some guys. What makes him different from other defensive coordinators? Like the defensive linemen learn coverage responsibilities, zone responsibilities. How do you do these sorts of things? And, I talked to guys saying, hey, this isn't something we did at previous places. So in saying that, like you look back, the big 4th and 5 blitz he brought against the Bills, and Josh Allen's been great against the blitz all year. The Chiefs blitz and they get 2 unblocked guys on a play, but yet they're playing zone behind it. And so this is what makes it so tricky. You don't know where they're coming from, and then you also don't know what they're going to play potentially behind it. But I think, Jeff, you spoke to a good point, which was like the Chiefs still were their identity, and they blitzed Josh Allen, even though he's really good against the blitz. And you can speak to this some. That's been a little bit of what Jalen Hurts maybe has struggled with this year, is that handling that pressure, knowing when to throw the ball away. And so the big thing with Spags is they always seem to get unblocked pressures. There's one thing to be like, okay, the blitz got there eventually. The Chiefs usually have guys running scot-free, and those are the sorts of plays that can change a game.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts this year against the blitz, it's been up and down. I think one of the things that's really troubled him is simulated pressures. And that, whereas it looks like it's going to be more coming, and it ends up only being 4. It just looks a little different than maybe typically a 4-man rush would look. And then he holds the ball too long. He gets off his first read, and that's when the sacks happen. That's when the throwaways happen. Now, 2 years ago, I mentioned the Eagles not picking up that blitz late in the game. For the most part, Hurts did pretty well against the blitz and had probably the best game of his career, aside from the fumble, which led to a touchdown. We all know that. But, he really kind of torched that Spagnuolo defense. Now, I think Spags' defense is better this year than it was 2 years ago. And it was great last year when they faced the Eagles in Kansas City. Hurts struggled against the blitz that game. Now, the Eagles won that game, contrary to what had happened in the Super Bowl. But, with Hurts and the blitz, with Jason Kelce no longer there, he used to call the pre-snap protections. When he retired this past offseason, Jalen Hurts, it started to fall on his shoulders more now. Now, Cam Jurgens, the new center, they kind of help in the offensive line. They'll help out Jalen Hurts. But he's hot more now because he's setting the protections, which is what you want sometimes, as long as you got a receiver that's open. But I think sometimes, as you mentioned, why Spags' blitzes are so tough to beat is because they just look a certain way. And in fact, you're thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to go hot here. When in fact, it's you're not hot. You have a receiver, and maybe it's your best guy who's bracketed by a couple zone defenders. So I think that's going to be a huge part of the game. Obviously, how the Eagles handled Chris Jones up front. I think what they do a lot of times is they use him as a decoy to set up and free up other guys in the blitz. And you probably could speak a little bit to that.
That's a great point. That's a great point. The Bills game, that's where the Bills slid their protection. They slid it to Chris Jones because, it's darned if you do, darned if you don't, right? It's like, oh my gosh, how'd you not get 4 hands on Chris Jones? Well, if you get 4 hands on Chris Jones, they'll drop the defensive lineman on the other side. And, all of a sudden you're blocking air or blocking him with 3 guys, and you've got 2 unblocked guys coming the other way. So seems like Noah does a great job of, kind of scheming to that, be like, okay, how do you utilize Chris Jones and make sure that all that attention he's getting can be used in a creative way? That's one way to do it. But Jeff, I think you're making a good point. This defense is better than the defense 2 years ago that the Eagles saw in the Super Bowl. But I don't want to pull any punches here either or pull the wool over people's eyes. Like, the Bills had success. The Bills scored 29 points against the Chiefs. The Chiefs struggled for the most part to stop Josh Allen. And If you're going up and down and looking at the roster and what's going on with both these teams heading into this game, I would expect some offensive success from the Eagles in this game. You know what I mean? Like, their receivers on the outside could cause some problems. And we saw in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, Trent McDuffie's a much better player, but the one weakness he does have is he doesn't have the huge size to go against a guy like A.J. Brown, outside the numbers. And we saw A.J. Brown go up and get one over the top of him. And it was interesting hearing McDuffie. I asked him about this at the Chiefs press conference when they were back in Kansas City. And he actually said he walked off the field, happy to win a Super Bowl, but like a little bit disappointed because he was like, hey, we as a defense didn't do what we thought we could do coming into this game. So he wants another shot at the Eagles. But I'm here to tell you, like you said, last year's Chiefs defense was dominant. It was really, really good. 2 years ago was not very good, was kind of dragged along by Mahomes. This one's somewhere in the middle, but it's had its struggles times this year. And then I'm sure we'll get to this point eventually. Like in the third quarter against the Bills ran all over them. That has not been a theme for the Chiefs this year, but that has to be something that the Eagles are watching on film and going, can we do and replicate this sort of thing against the Chiefs? And if so, obviously things could tilt in their favor.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles, look, we haven't even mentioned Saquon Barkley yet. And, they're going to have to ride him to some extent. That's been the formula all year. The Eagles don't want to get away from him too much early on. That being said, if you look at the history of the Super Bowl, if you look at the teams that have won Super Bowls over the last 25 years plus, it's been behind quarterbacks that can throw, that are, when you're put in certain circumstances and you need to win it, you need to have an elite thrower. Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback, but if you're putting it on his shoulders, that's where the problem comes. That being said, the Eagles have been able to win this way all season. There's no reason to think they can't do it in the Super Bowl. And as you mentioned, the Chiefs' run defense is strong. Spags is probably going to stack the box. He's probably going to put it on Jalen Hurts. I don't think that's any surprise, but the Eagles have seen that before. And Barkley's still been able to break off big runs. And, if they can get ahead in the second quarter, they're going to be tough to beat. They got ahead 2 years ago and were beat. This is a different defense. This is a different defensive coordinator, which doesn't necessarily lead me to the third point. But, the one thing I wanted to kind of go over was, we all know the big names from this game on both sides of the ball. The Eagles with Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, obviously an effective receiver on the other side of the ball, Patrick Mahomes. The other team, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco, Xavier Worthy. But is there one guy maybe under the radar that you think the Chiefs are most concerned about heading into this game?
Yeah, maybe not under the radar for Eagles fans, obviously, but Dallas Goedert is the one to me. I mean, if you look at the season-long numbers for the Chiefs, when they face tight ends, they give up yardage, they give up plays, and they don't really have a great answer in their secondary and with the guys that they have to sort of counteract that sort of thing over the middle of the field, that intermediate middle of the field. And so I think the Chiefs have to have a huge concern there. And again, this is one of those topics where it would keep getting brought up sort of in the middle weeks and they still couldn't fix it. You know what I mean? This is just one of those things with their defense that they give up. And the Chiefs have not faced a dominant tight end so far in this playoffs. And obviously, if Dalton Kincaid could adjust back and catch that ball on 4th and 5, potentially you'd be talking about a different Super Bowl, maybe Eagles-Bills this week instead of the one that we are talking about. But I definitely that's a big concern for the Chiefs defense coming in here, because if you're just looking at overall weaknesses and one thing that just they have not been able to solve in this particular defense with, guys like Shamari Connor who are trying to guard that position, or some of the rotations they have on the back end with their safeties, that's the one thing that would stand out. So I think that would be the one on the Chiefs sideline. I'm sure you probably have one from the Eagles sideline. Who are they looking at for the Chiefs to potentially be that one that maybe could give them a bit of problems if things fall the Chiefs' way?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously mentioned with Goddard that Eagles fans, they know that this guy is going to be dangerous, and the same goes for my guy Xavier Worthy. He's been, the rookies. He's been kind of the only guy that's been able to stretch the field a little bit for the Chiefs. And I know, as you mentioned, this isn't a downfield kind of throwing offense, but when they do go down the field, it seems like it's to him. He doesn't quite have the route tree, maybe the ability to track deep balls the way that Tyreek Hill did, but he can do it on occasion. I think where they're going to have to be more concerned about it, we mentioned this earlier, is just how much he's used in the misdirection game, how much they'll get those little flares out to him, get the ball in his hands and allow him to use that elite type of speed to pick up, it could be like 4 or 5 yards on first down. Those are kind of simulated run plays to almost an extent if the run game isn't working. And then sometimes he can break those off if he's got, good blocking in front of him. So I think he's the chess piece. It was almost, I was like maybe the one when I did my mock draft last year, it was like the one I got right in the first round because I just said, this is an Andy Reid type of player. And
me too. Yep. They love these receivers.
You got it right. Yeah. And it turned out that way. Now you're worried if you're the Chiefs about, Hopkins and Hollywood Brown, who's got speed. You have Juju Smith-Schuster. These are guys who've done it for a long time, but they just have a lot of tread on the tires. And I think the Eagles have the speed in the secondary and the zone coverage where they can handle those guys. I think Xavier Worthy has to be the X factor. And of course, I mentioned Travis Kelce, but I still think if they're going to win, Worthy has to get involved.
Two things. Something very interesting about Xavier. Yeah, his average depth of target, if you watch over the season, has shrunk. So they used to use him basically just as a deep threat. And then as the season got along and, they lost Rashee Rice to injury early in the season, they've incorporated more and more of the offense as he's gotten it. So that's one thing to watch. Again, you're talking about quick RPOs, screens. They have him coming across the formation and carry the ball. So they've really used him on some short type of stuff, easier type of stuff to get him the ball. And that's happened. He's real good with whip routes as well. So watch him on third down, cutting inside. If you're in man coverage, he cuts back out. It's really, really difficult to defend. But the second thing I'm going to mention, Patrick Mahomes told me last year his favorite play from Super Bowl against the 49ers, Super Bowl 58, was the deep pass he had, other than the championship winner, deep pass he had to McCall Hardman down the field. And they completed for about 40 or about 50 yards. But again, the Chiefs last year were not known for their deep passes. But he said he thinks it gets in the back of defenses' minds if they can complete one of those to be like, hey, they can do it. They're capable of doing it. So to your point, we're talking about all these trends and things that have gone with the Chiefs, and they don't have explosiveness. They don't throw it downfield, all those sorts of things. I would not be surprised at all if early, especially Patrick Mahomes, hearing him say that and say that he feels like it's really important early to put in the back of the defense's mind that the Chiefs can go deep. Maybe they unleash Xavier Worthy on one of those deep. Again, they haven't connected on many of them this year, but it is something to watch for because, like I said, Mahomes told me that was his favorite pass of the Super Bowl because the 49ers basically had to expect it from then on out. He felt like it opened up their offense. And so I would not be surprised at all if the Chiefs tried to do the same thing as the Eagles just to put something back there so the Eagles know that they can't just bring everybody up toward the line of scrimmage and know the Chiefs are going to play their, check down game all game. Well,
I warned Patrick Mahomes to be careful because Vic Fangio does not want to allow explosive plays. In fact, no opposing offense, pass defense has allowed fewer explosive plays this season. And I imagine he's going to do his best to make Mahomes check down, make him audible in the run plays. He just wants to kind of bend okay. He's okay with bending. But he feels like his defense won't break when they're in the red zone. So it should be really interesting to see how this game plays out. I haven't quite made my prediction yet, but I think it's going to be a close one. Could go either way.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. It's interesting. My prediction for Super Bowl 57, I remember thinking the same thing. It's like, if you just match up these two rosters, I'm probably taking the Eagles. But, the Chiefs seem to have this little magic something in the postseason, and Mahomes always seems to be at his best. And you just mentioned about this being a quarterback game or a quarterback league or, whoever wins Super Bowl is quarterback led. I mean, Jalen Hurts, you mentioned, played his butt off that last Super Bowl. He was good enough to win that game. But, in the clutch moments, Mahomes is a little bit better. And then you just don't know, like the corn dog thing. Like you just don't know what's coming out of Andy Reid's sleeve at the exact right time. And so that really does make this an even matchup because I think, like I said, I mean, you can go down offensive line versus defensive line, the defense overall versus passing, offense for the Chiefs. Like most of those, I would probably give the slight edge to the Eagles. But there is just something in the postseason the Chiefs seem to have mastered. And a lot of that goes back to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. That's why this one should be a great one coming up on Sunday.
Great. Well, Jesse, thank you for joining me. Again, I'm Jeff McLane, and for Jesse Newell, everybody, thanks for watching us, and hope you enjoy Super Bowl 59 on Sunday. That's it from us. Talk to you later.